Привет, Инзабогорным! I'm Russian, and I'll tell my tales from the Russian point of view, because we also want to be heard. Now that I've talked about solar gods in the Shadow and Bone series, I think we can smoothly transfer into another series and talk about Slavic gods and American gods. And I have to say right away, unlike Lee Barduga, Neil Gaiman actually did a really good job with his research. But does it mean that everything is perfect? No, it doesn't. So, in the series, we have two types of Slavic gods, and first we meet
Zorya Vechernyaya.
Well, they tried. Her name should be pronounced Zorya Vechernyaya. So in Russian tradition, Zorya is the personification of the dawn, hence the name. Zorya literally means dawn. The series has 3 sisters, but in my research I found that the most common description was of a singular deity named Zorya Zoryanitsa. However, there are mentions of 2 sisters, but if you look up the most common names given to them, it's actually a personification of stars, not dawn. And in other resources, they actually have human names like Darya and Maria, Maria and Mariana, or Mariana and Mavreya, of all things. And if that's not confusing enough, there are sources of there being 3 sisters. But when I actually opened the book cited in the sources and tried to look up the information, there wasn't any. So if internet is confused, everyone is confused. The second god is named Czernobog, and oh boy. You can make Russian men murderous psychopaths and at the same time not make them ugly as a mortal sin. Just throwing it out there because clearly someone in Hollywood didn't get the memo. Alright, let's talk about Czernobog as a god. Well, he's actually not Russian, and yeah, it's a known fact, but does it make it any better? No. Let me give you an example. Imagine that the first English settlers in the New World would bring some obscure Scandinavian god with them, simply because they are all Germanic people. Doesn't really seem logical, right? By that time, people in England and different Scandinavian countries had pretty different historical and cultural background. Same with Russians and different West Slavic nations. Of course we do have a lot of similarities due to our common ethnic background, but we also developed under very different circumstances, and it's just really sad when people think that we can just be substituted by one another. Moreover, we don't know when exactly Czernobog came to New York, but there is enough evidence to point out that this happened after the Russian Revolution, so in the beginning of the 20th century. And here's the thing, people who immigrated at the time were very unlikely to be pagans. Now, I do have to say that paganism was mentioned in Russian law as one of the okay religions, but I couldn't really find any information on the ethnicity of people practicing it. And those studies that did claim the existence of pagan practices among Russians talked about this so-called double belief, which is basically the idea that old traditions mixed with Christianity and as such still existed at the time. But even they connected paganism with Russian peasantry, while those who immigrated to the United States were members of nobility, merchants and industrial tycoons, white army soldiers, and wealthy landowners called kulaki in Russian or kulaks in English. Out of all those people, only kulaks could potentially be practitioners of paganism, but why would they bring a Western god of evil with them is beyond me. Now, is there a better option? I think so. Now I know for sure that Neil Gaiman is aware of Perun, as he mentioned he didn't want to use his character because he had a lot of similarities to Odin. And Perun had an evil enemy called Viles, whose appearance and powers had many similarities with our understanding of Satan, even down to his popular depictions in the form of a snake. On top of that, he is called the god of cattle, so it would make sense for kulaks as landowners to know about him. And considering that Czernobog and American gods worked as a knocker, I honestly don't see any reason why not choose Viles instead. Anyway, let's continue.
And I brought you a present.
Oh my god! Russians drinking vodka! Never seen that before. In all seriousness, if you wanted to add alcohol, make it red wine. Nowadays it is believed that you can use it as a non-bloody offering to Czernobog, because it looks like blood, but, actually is not.
The Zorya sisters always make a marvelous home.
The plural form of Zorya is Zorya, just so you know.
My sister and I make $1 here, $1 there, reading fortune.
Oh, here's an interesting fact to you. It seems that Neil Gaiman decided to give the sisters fortune-telling abilities himself, but people did in fact use Zorya to tell the future. However, in different occasions, a red dawn was connected to a bad omen and a good sign, so personally, I wouldn't go to them for any future readings, no matter how accurate some of them claim to be.
I think your husband might beat you to it.
Oh, Czernobog is nobody's husband.
Oh, but he is. You see, modern-day Russians believe that he is married to Marana or Mara. She has many names. Basically, she is the goddess of cold and evil. Of course. And yeah, it's not historical, so I really wonder how it would play out in the world of American gods. Would he just wake up one day married? Or will he start hallucinating her until she gradually becomes a permanent part of his reality?
And I'm nobody's wife. Relatives.
No and no. Zorya's husband, according to the modern-day neo-pagan tradition, is a solar god named Horus. I've talked about him in my last video. And her actual brother is the sun as a solar object. And this last part is actually historically correct. It is mentioned in different folk songs and sayings. And obviously she's not in any way, shape or form related to Czernobog, but they do mention that.
When I was young, there were servants to make meals. Here there are no servants, there's only us. And learning is beneath me.
While Zorya is pretty well known, she's not considered to be a goddess, but a personification of a natural event, so nobody worshipped her, at least not in a way you'd worship a powerful god, so it is very unlikely that her life among humans was so luxurious that she had lots of servants catering to all of her whims.
I can help.
You sit, you're a guest. Coffee first.
The sisters are described as maidens, but they are not. I don't think that Neil Gaiman came up with it himself. I believe it was mentioned in one of the books he used to research Slavic mythology. I think the confusion comes from the fact that Zorya Zoryanitsa is often described as Krasna Devitsa. It rhymes. Zorya Zoryanitsa, Krasnaya Devitsa. And Krasna Devitsa is literally translated as beautiful maiden. And because she's called maiden, people assume that she's someone who reads these kinds of books but doesn't participate in them. But historically, she has often been associated with children, and in modern interpretations, she even has children of her own.
I thought you were supposed to read tea leaves.
Tea is disgusting.
Just so you know, Russia is one of the biggest consumers of tea. We have a rich tradition of tea making that we are proud of. So it's really weird for her to say something like that.
Where we're from, everyone has the same color. So we must fight over shades. You see, my brother had light hair and beard, me dark, like you. I was like the black man over there.
What? Did he really just say that people with black hair are discriminated against because they have a black hair? What? And Billabong is mostly depicted as an old man, hence the white hair. Also, so, no, Czernobog is not evil because he has dark features. He is Czernobog because Czerny in Old Slavonic meant evil, and he's evil because people needed a personification of evil, so they created that personification of evil. As simple as that. Also, you may have noticed that some of those pictures depict him as kind of a skeleton. That's because his image gradually merges with that of Ricochet the Deathless, a very prominent figure in Russian fairy tales. Basically, an immortal skeleton with immense treasures.
I think in the old country, I'm forgotten here. I'm like a bad memory.
Actually, quite on contrary, he's more well known now than he ever was. He is still a more lesser known god, but he's definitely not forgotten, and people actually have significantly softened his image. While many still believe that he is a god of destruction and misfortune, others see him as an absence of evil. I found one very interesting interview with new pagan priests, and they said the following. If you simply replaced the good Jesus with Belobog and evil Satan with Czernobog, just return back to the church. You do not belong in the temple. For a pagan, there is no such thing as an absolute good or absolute evil. It's so sad looking at the people dressed in the clothes with symbols trying to separate the individual opposites, light and darkness. It is impossible to praise only the gods of light and at the same time despise and fear the mentions of the gods of darkness. So, no, Czernobog is not even a bad memory.
It is a thing. It's not a god, like a god. It's a bad thing, chained up in those stars. If it escapes, it will lead the whole of everything. So we watch the sky, all day, all night. The three sisters. If he escapes the thing in the stars, the world is over. Like that.
People believe that?
No, they don't. The youngest Zorya is talking about the god named Simargl. He definitely is a god, one of the 6 gods of Vladimir's pantheon. He just had a non-humanoid look, though nowadays some people interpret him as being a human with shape-shifting abilities. And the thing is, he is not evil. Actually, he was often seen as a protector of people in many cases. And locking him up makes no sense because one of his main purposes is to deliver messages from gods to humans and vice versa, hence the wings. I really wonder where did this version of him came from.
The whole country you were draped with pearl, loved, feared, waited upon. Excess suits you.
There is no mentions of people ever fearing Zorya, and it is possible that Zorya had servants in her celestial castle, but people did not see her as a god, as I said, and more like a magical immortal being. For example, one of the rituals I found was to protect plants from worms. Useful, but not something you'd ask from a creature you fear and adore.
In old country, I opened the gate for my father at dusk when he returned to us.
Now that is actually accurate.
But there are new gods growing in America. They've already replaced us.
I know this is a stylistic choice, but just so you know, there is a god, or possibly a goddess, with 3 heads, quite logically called Triglav, which means 3 heads.
I like cigarettes because they remind me of the offerings that they once burnt in my honor, the smoke. Rising up to the sky as they begged for my approval, my favor.
Well, possibly, but from what I found, most common offerings to Czernobog involved spilling blood. And I'm not a specialist, but I think that burning something wet is not the easiest task out there. Also, people didn't want Czernobog's approval or favor. They wanted him to stay as far away as possible. And if he did give them something, people would try their damnedest to return it to him.
Yes, much to be done. The bell must ring, mirrors covered, windows open, we must sprinkle the holy salt.
Czernobog!
Okay, almost correct. When there is a dead body in the house, you must cover any reflective surface. It is believed that if an image of a dead person gets reflected in anything, their soul will be trapped and will keep coming back to haunt people. Also, windows must be closed so the soul wouldn't fly away. So, no, windows should not be opened when the dead is inside. However, when the body is buried, then they will be opened so that anyone could come and express their condolences to the family. And yeah, this is still a thing. Okay, this is getting pretty heavy, so I should probably stop. I know that Czernobog appears again in third season, but I refuse to watch the show until they bring Mad Sweeney back. Besides, I don't think there is much mythology left to discuss, so subscribe if you want to learn more about Russia and Russian culture, and thanks for listening. Пока-пока!